Thank you to the presenters this afternoon. It certainly is encouraging to hear of the continued work in this area. From a school perspective in BC, I've been involved with school-wide positive behavior support for just over the past decade. And certainly BC has been looked to from other provinces as kind of a leader in this area. It certainly has waned, I would say, probably in the last couple of years. But I personally have seen the benefits of its impact at a school-wide level. And with that history and the evidence of the stories of schools and the stories of students and the successes, it certainly requires our continued focused efforts to make sure that the supports are there to ensure that all students are supported. Just a couple of things that for me kind of were highlights. And there's some opportunity here in BC with our movement towards an inclusive education setting. And so we talk a lot about that in schools. From my perspective, with my schools, speaking to the benefit of that. And then it comes down to, well, how do we make that happen? Given the context, given the resources, given some of the diversity we see within our schools and our classrooms, how do we make that happen? And the reality is there's no simple answer or solution. And I think some of the things we heard today kind of resonate on how we're going to get there in a better way. Dr. Kegel talked this morning about engagement through meaningful experiences. And so for classroom teachers and for support staff that are working with students and for principals that are supporting those teams, it's about making sure that we're putting the right resources in place for those students in those situations. There's also an opportunity with our new curriculum. Our revised curriculum, and we heard from Dr. Knight around those opportunities that exist in terms of the soft skills and how over the conversations over the last decade have been, we don't have time to address this. Well, now we absolutely do have the time, and actually it's a critical part to our vision of an educated citizen for students who are leaving. That's all of our students. And so that's been really an important piece, I think, in terms of the level of priority for classroom teachers and the curriculum. Dr. Stock talked about barriers, and so we know despite some of these opportunities and some of the changes in philosophy, that the number one barrier that exists for many students is challenging or problem behavior, because it does potentially lead to exclusionary practices. And not that schools intend on doing that, but it's progression. And so when we stay in that reactive mode, where we're just trying to put out the fire, that sometimes that can lead to increasing, well, it might help in the short term, in the immediate. It can lead to some problematic strategies. And we've seen that in terms of seclusion and restraint and the guidelines that we now have, which thankfully talk about positive behavior support being used at a school-wide and individual level. And so we need to keep our eye on that and make sure that we're aware of that and take the proactive and preventative approach, which is what positive behavior support is really about. And so we heard about the understanding of the function of behavior. Classroom teachers, it's really hard when you have a class of kids and to not think in a reactive way when things are happening. And so from my level, it's about creating supports and resources to support those situations so that we can take the time to use the expertise to plan and to support in a way that goes beyond just the reactive. So it is built on the understanding of the student, and we heard several things today from the involvement of everyone, from the classroom teacher to the support staff, to the principal, our intentionality around making sure that they have access to the training and supports. We heard from the Surrey School District around their efforts to include the expertise and then reach out to those groups that are in the trenches working directly with those students to make sure we attend to that proactive, preventative piece. One of the things that I think is really important is the collaboration. And so this isn't one individual, it's not one role, and collaborative meaning the inclusion of parents in that discussion around consistency among settings. While, maybe perhaps isn't everything, it's certainly one of the most important things in terms of making sure that we have those collaborative discussions in the planning for all students. I like Dr. Stock's idea of power of optimism. So what's within our control? Because sometimes those things are not certain things are not within, but what do we control within the context of school? And so we can control how we view behavior. We might not be able to control the behavior in the moment, but we can certainly take the time to think about it, and we can certainly be in control of our response and making sure that it's appropriate and taking the necessary steps to support that student in their learning. The idea of peers, and I think this is something that we're coming to realize the importance of, and it again relates to making sure that our students are in inclusive environments. They will not get that opportunity to experience and learn from their peers if they're not with their peers in that natural classroom setting. And so again, from my perspective, we have to make sure that we're supporting all our efforts to make sure that students are included despite some challenging behavior, and making sure that we're constantly trying to problem solve and be proactive. So just a few insights.